We're all taught that a high income is the golden ticket to wealth. But what if that's actually a really dangerous illusion? Look, today we're not going to talk about stock tips or hot investments. Instead, we're going to dive into something I like to call the hidden physics of finance. We're talking about the behavioral patterns that explain this weird thing we all see. Some people quietly building real, lasting security, while others, even with these huge paychecks, just seem to be stuck on a treadmill, running faster and faster but going nowhere.
It all really kicks off with this one question. One that I think a lot of us have felt, even if we couldn't quite put our finger on it. You know the situation, right? You look at two people, they're both smart, both pulling in a great income, but one of them is clearly building something real, something durable, while the other is just stuck, running in place. So what's going on? What's the invisible force that's driving these two people to such wildly different places?
Okay, so to get to the bottom of that, we have to start by tackling this really common paradox. I call it the high-income illusion. And it's exactly what it sounds like, this huge, often confusing disconnect between having a big paycheck and having genuine, actual financial security. So let's look at two profiles here, two very different paths you can be on. First, you've got the high earner. Yeah, they've got a high, super predictable salary, which feels great, but it's totally dependent on their labor, on them showing up and doing the work. And because of that, their net worth often just kind of stalls out. Then you've got the quiet builder. Their cash flow might be all over the place, a little lumpy, but their focus is completely different. They're building assets, they're building systems, and that's why their net worth and their leverage just keep on growing. See, the real difference isn't the salary number, it's the entire system they're operating in.
And that right there, that brings us to the absolute core signal of this whole explainer. Here it is. Your financial outcomes are driven way less by the size of your income and way more by the system you operate within. It's a total fundamental shift in thinking, from focusing on earning to focusing on the system itself.
Okay, so that's the big idea. But how does this actually show up in the real world? Well, we can break this signal down into three, let's call them invisible forces. These are patterns that you'll see repeat over and over again, and they perfectly explain that paradox we talked about at the beginning.
All right, signal number one, money follows leverage, not labor. Well, what does that mean? It means wealth really starts to build up in places where your output is no longer directly tied to your input of time. That's where you find real financial momentum, in systems that can work, grow, and churn out value even when you're not actively trading your hours for dollars.
Signal number two is a bit more subtle, even deceptive. It's this. A steady income can create a powerful illusion of security. I mean, it feels safe, right? That predictable paycheck hits the bank account. But what it often does is mask a really deep financial fragility. It can make you completely dependent on that one single source, and it can blind you to the risks that are lurking just beneath the surface.
And now for the third signal. And this one might be the most powerful of them all. It's that ownership completely flips your relationship with time on its head. See, when you're just earning, time is a cost. It's a resource you're selling off piece by piece. But when you own productive assets, time suddenly transforms into your single greatest ally.
Okay, so we've seen the patterns, these three forces, but what are the mechanics? What's actually going on underneath? This is where we get into what I call the physics of ownership, the underlying drivers that give these patterns all their power. Really, it all kicks off with understanding one word: leverage. And look, don't let that word intimidate you. It's not some complicated financial product. It's just a simple idea: the ability to scale your output, your results, without having to proportionally increase your direct input, your own personal time and effort. Think about things like code, or media, or capital, things that can work for you at a massive scale.
And here's what that difference looks like in really stark terms. With pure labor, you're getting a one-to-one return. You put in 1 hour of effort, you get 1 unit of output back. Simple. But leverage? That's a whole different ballgame. That gives you a nonlinear and n times return. It completely shatters the link between your time and your results.
This really captures the absolute essence of that shift in thinking. When you own the system, instead of just working in it, time literally stops being something you spend and it starts being something you invest. Suddenly, time is on your team. It starts working for you thanks to the incredible power of compounding.
But what's the flip side? What happens when we misunderstand this signal or maybe just ignore it? Well, there are these quiet, long-term costs that get paid by people who operate only within that earning system. And the problem is the price you're paying is often completely hidden until it's way too late.
I want you to just look at this number for a second. $450,000 a year. I mean, on the surface, that looks like the absolute definition of success, right? Of security.
But the really uncomfortable truth is that a number like that can exist right alongside extreme financial fragility. Because if that huge income is 100% dependent on your direct labor, on you showing up every day, then you are way more vulnerable than you think.
These are the hidden costs of relying only on your own labor. For one, your income eventually just plateaus no matter how good you get. Why? Because there are only so many hours in a day. You're also totally overexposed to a single point of failure. If that one job disappears, poof, so does your security. That means you have very low resilience to any kind of economic shock. And in the end, time itself, your most precious, non-renewable resource, becomes the ultimate thing holding you back.
So, okay, what's the alternative here? Now, I want to be really clear. This is not a checklist of things you need to go out and do. This is about understanding a completely different mental model. It's about what we call the owner's edge.
This table does a great job of breaking down the two different operating systems. For the earner, time is seen as a resource to be sold. It's a cost. Income is the primary measure of security. And risk? Risk looks like stock market volatility or losing your job. But for the owner, the perspective is totally different. Time is an asset that compounds. Income isn't the goal. It's just a byproduct of a good system. And the real risk, the thing they worry about, it's structural dependence, being reliant on a single thing they can't control.
Okay, so how do you take all this and apply it to your own life? Well, to wrap this up, we're not going to give you answers. We're going to leave you with 3 questions, a tool for you to use to really reflect on your own financial system. First question, where is your leverage? Seriously, take a look at your work, at your life. Where is your output not directly tied to your minute-by-minute, hour-by-hour effort?
Second question, what do you really own? And I'm not just talking about the obvious stuff, like stocks or a house. I mean what assets, and that could be systems, products, a platform, an audience. What assets are out there working for you, completely independent of you having to put in the labor?
And finally, let's strip it all the way back to its simplest, most powerful form. This is a question to just carry with you, to think about as you move through the world and observe how things work. What do you own?